Hello, this is Father Louis SCURTI. Welcome to Friends of the Word. We're taping this during the month of November, All Souls Day month. And we're here in Our Lady Queen of Peace Church in Hewitt, or West Milford, New Jersey. And the pastor set up this beautiful sanctuary in memory of the deceased of the parish and their relatives. So it's an appropriate location for the topic we're dealing with. My guest is Nancy FAULCH. Nancy, welcome, and thank you for welcoming me into your ministry.
Thank you.
How about you let our audience know what your ministry is called?
My ministry is the Bereavement Ministry, and what I do in this ministry is I'm a facilitator for bereavement support groups at both Queen of Peace and at St. Joe's in West Milford. And I also did groups in Rockaway at St. Cecilia's.
Okay, that's great. Nancy was introduced by us by one of our crew members whose family utilized her services as a grief counselor and grief support facilitator. I have to be careful not using the word counselor, so if I use that, just don't hear it. It's a very serious ministry. Some churches call it Lazarus ministry. Doesn't matter, bereavement ministry, doesn't matter. But the idea of it is to work with the families of the deceased. And we've all had some families members who have died. And it's important for the church to stand up and come up forward with an alternative and an additional support rather than just the wake and the funeral and mass. It's not enough, okay? And Nancy, you're going to tell us why it's not enough. How did you get into this ministry?
13 years ago, my husband John died suddenly, and I ended up going to a bereavement support group. I had never heard of them before, but one of my sons was down in South Jersey attending college, and he wanted to drop out because he was so upset over his father's loss. And the counselor on campus suggested that he go to a bereavement support group, and he didn't want to go. So I said to him, I was working here, and so I couldn't go down and be with him.
You working here in the parish?
I was a high school math teacher.
Oh, wow.
So I was working in Passaic, New Jersey at the time. And I said to him, well, if I go to a group here, will you go to one down there?
Bravo. Is he an only child?
No, I have 3 sons.
3 sons. Okay,
Yes.
but this one was in college.
This one was in college, and he really was, well, they were all affected by their father's death, but he in particular, because he was there just before his father died in the house. So it really affected him hard. So he went to a bereavement group down there, and I went to one here in Lincoln Park, because there was none here at Queen of Peace. And it really helped me a lot. It helped me understand what I was feeling, why I would cry all the way to work and all the way home, because I had never seen my mother cry like that when my dad died. So I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was crying so much. And by being in the group, I learned about grief and I learned about guilt, and it helped me understand about that.
This is good because I want our audience to utilize the services of their parishes, or maybe through your information on our site, but to know what's normal. And death is normal, regrettably, and one of the hardest things we have to deal with. And I think knowing the structure of what you're talking about is going to be very important for our audience. What was that original group like? I know we'll talk about your ministry here, but what was that original group like? What did you see when you walked in the room?
The original group was run by a sister, so I was sort of surprised because the people in the group were all widows and widowers. Nobody else had lost their parent or their child. And I thought, how could she relate to what we were going through?
Let me tell you something, a different side story. I'm a marriage and family therapist. And last week I was at a social gathering and I met a Jewish woman, and I told her, I'm a Catholic priest and also marriage and family therapist. And her question was, I often wondered, how could a priest who's celibate advise couples who are married? I said, I want to smack her upside the head because, like we're people. Go ahead, tell me, as a people, this nun whose mother, whose partner did not die,
Right.
it didn't relate, comes across as a professional. Okay, so what did you learn from that experience?
Well, what she explained to us was that she could relate to us because one of the other sisters who she had been very close to had died.
Okay, so she knew death.
So she knew death. And then she would give us information sheets, and we would talk about what's on those information sheets. And we would share with each other, which is what I do. When I do a bereavement support group, the idea is not for me to counsel them because I'm not a counselor. I was a high school math teacher my whole life.
Right.
So I didn't go for counseling. But I went for training to be a facilitator.
Okay, before we get to that, 'cause that'll be a whole nother show, because I want to know I want the audience to know what you experienced going into that first one, because this is going to be important, because what you do is going to be very important for us. But that first initial meeting, like say a person goes to AA, that first initial meeting is fearful sometimes. So
Yes,
what was that
absolutely.
first meeting like?
Well, the sister welcomed everybody. She had music playing, so that sort of calmed your nerves.
Good.
She talked about why we were there. She had us introduce ourselves and tell who you lost and when you lost them and what your relationship was to them. What else? And she just tried to make you feel comfortable.
Okay.
And then she asked us what was bothering us. And for me, it was the fact that I was crying all the time because I didn't feel that was normal. Not that I cried all the time. I didn't cry. I would cry from West Milford to Passaic, where I worked.
It's quite
And
a
as soon
trip.
as I got to the high school, I would stop because I didn't want my students to see me crying. So I would stop. And then when I would leave school, again, I would cry all the way home. So I really thought there was something wrong with me. But I found by attending the group that there was nothing wrong with me, that I was grieving for my husband. And I felt guilty about a lot of things that happened when he died. And they talked about guilt. And I heard other people share about different things they felt guilty about.
I don't want to be too personal. Just share what you want to share. What did you feel guilty about?
I felt guilty because when my husband died, I had been raised Catholic and in Wallington, and it was during what I call the doom and gloom age of our religion, where we were told over and over again that if you die in sin, you go straight to hell. So since my husband and I hadn't attended Mass for so long, and I knew we were both in sin, when he died, I figured he went straight to hell, and how could I have a Mass for him?
Oh, Lord of life.
So I did not have a Mass for him at that time.
Right.
10 months later, I did have a Mass celebrating his life.
Good, good.
So that was one of the things that I felt guilty about.
Okay. So that's important for our audience to know, that we're not the judge. God's the judge, and God reads our hearts and our whole selves.
Right.
Not going to Mass, okay, Catholics believe it's an obligation, but I don't think it's something that God would say, oh, you're going to hell, you didn't go to church on Sunday, please. I mean, he's bigger than that. His son died on a cross,
Right.
so he's not going to judge us by that one
But that
thing.
wasn't how I felt at the
Yeah,
time,
no, that's
because
very important,
That's
yeah.
not what I was taught.
Exactly.
So that was one of the things. Another thing I felt guilty about, the night he died, he fell down the stairs at home. He was drunk. And when I came home, he was on the floor in the bathroom. And he was dying, but I didn't know that. I thought he was passed out on the floor, as he had been many times before. And I tried to wake him, and he wouldn't wake. But I didn't call 911 because I felt, well, he's on the floor because he's drunk. And we had a dark rug on the floor, and I didn't see that. He was bleeding out, that he had this huge cut in his head, and I didn't know about it. And then I stayed down in that room. We have a computer down there, so I was on the computer. And I would go and check on him every so often. And all of a sudden, one time when I went, his breathing had changed, and it had this gurgling sound.
Oh,
So I called 911. I called my next door neighbor. I called 911. And when they came, I had no idea of how serious it was. And they told me to go upstairs. I have a split-level house. And I wasn't allowed to stay there when he took his last breath. And I felt guilty about that. I felt like if I had called an hour earlier, that he probably would have lived. But it turns out that wasn't true. The detective from West Milford went to the autopsy and asked about that, and they said, no, he would have died anyway. If they had moved him, he would have died faster. But that didn't make any difference to me. I felt guilty about it for a long time.
How long were you married?
35 years.
God bless you. Wow.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I felt guilty about.
Yeah.
And that one, yeah, I talk about guilt in the bereavement support group, and I let the people know the different kinds of guilt I have, and I encourage everybody to talk about the guilt that they have. And the whole idea of a support group is that they support each other.
Yes, yes.
And by the end of the time, they do support each other.
Yes.
And that's what I see.
Going back to that group, the original group, that was the first time you shared this in a church setting because you hadn't been going to church. Was that universal? Did most of the people understand that? Did they identify with that? Did they say, oh, me too, I didn't go to church and I feel guilty about that?
No, they looked at me like I was crazy that I didn't go to church.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, so they were all churchgoers.
They were all churchgoers.
Okay, but
yeah.
did they shun you?
No.
Okay, that's important. Okay, so they look at a sister, you, in mourning, and they understand. What other kinds of guilt did you hear there at that meeting?
I could remember at that meeting, one of the women, her husband was a diabetic. And he died because he didn't keep on top of his medicine. And she said, oh, that's my fault. I should have given him his, and I should have checked it. And I sat there thinking to myself, that's not your responsibility. That's his responsibility.
Okay.
But I didn't say that. I wouldn't hurt her feelings by saying that.
That's good. That's good.
And nobody ever said to me, oh, Nancy, you shouldn't feel guilty about. Although when I felt guilty and I talked to a priest about it, he, of course, said to me, you shouldn't feel guilty about that. You didn't know he was dying. And I said, I know, but I do feel guilty about it.
Yeah, interesting. And guilt is often overplayed. I like to say any of us should feel guilty if we've committed a sin, if we've done something wrong. Not if we didn't see it, if we absolutely committed a sin
Right.
or deed, and you didn't in that situation. You're not a professional. No. You weren't a doctor, nurse, EMT. So what you were is a wife
Right.
who saw her husband.
Right.
And
had seen him like that before.
yeah.
I had seen him on the floor, passed out. I knew he fell down the stairs. I had seen him fall down the stairs. So what I was observing was something I had seen before.
And guilt is one of the stages that people go through.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
When another person passes.
Right.
And we'll talk about various
Yes.
levels of guilt. In your work, do you use the stages of death and dying that I'm so familiar with Kubler-Ross?
I don't. I know what you're talking about, but no, I don't make a big deal about, and you may think it is a big deal,
Hey.
but I don't. I use the sheets that were given to me in a booklet when I went for training.
Great.
And I give the people packets, and I have a couple of them here. And they have about 6 papers in the packet. They're two-sided.
And we're going to go through those in another show. Okay, that's good though. So cognitive information is very important to give the person who's heavily in her or his emotional stage. Let's think about this. Okay, the rational presentation, very, very good, helpful. So, sister, and your group gave sheets out
Right.
with information on it. How did the people react to those sheets? Or how did you react?
I liked that I had something to take home with me so that I could read it again
Good.
when I had to,
Good.
because I didn't realize it at the time. But when you lose somebody so close to you, you are in shock. I never knew what the word shock meant until I lost my husband.
Yeah.
And you're able to get through, but barely. And you're really not thinking straight all the time. And So I was glad that I had the material to take home. And because of that, I do the same thing as a facilitator. I give them packets to take home. And
Good. Where did you said you trained or you took training? Where did you and with whom?
ask me this.
Bad question. Bad question.
Yes.
You can ignore it if you want to.
I went to Newark, to the Archdiocese. Is it the Archdiocese?
Yeah, yeah. In Newark, it's your shot. Yeah.
Okay, I went
Okay.
there for training
Okay.
one time. And the other time I went to a school that the Patterson Diocese had given me the information. So I actually went for training twice.
Good. 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 How many weeks was the original experience with that sister in the town?
I think it was 6 weeks, and
Okay.
that's what I normally do.
Okay.
Sometimes I have 6 weeks, sometimes I have 8 weeks.
Okay, so people come to the group, and I want to, again, this is the initial group, I want the audience to know about it. Come, and it could last 6 weeks, or more or less, probably.
More or less.
And how did it conclude, that original session? Do you remember? Oh, no big deal if you don't.
I have to think about it.
No, no, that's all right, because we'll find out how you conclude yours, which
Okay.
is more important. And I want to throw in something, did you have refreshments? I know it's a goofy question.
There, she gave us something to drink, or she would say we could perhaps bring something to drink.
Okay, okay.
In my group, I give them refreshments.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Very.
And I'll explain why.
Okay, not now. Good. I want them to come back again for another show. Excellent. From that original experience, what else did you learn when you left?
I learned that the feelings that I had were normal feelings.
Great.
And that's what I needed the most, to know that I was normal, because I thought I was crazy at that point.
May he rest in peace. What was husband's name?
John.
John. May John rest in peace.
Okay.
And I think we're in a beautiful environment, remembering John. How many years ago was that?
13 years ago.
And remembering John, all those who have died. This is Father Louis SCURTI. We're ending the first session of the whole idea of grief counseling, grief experiences in a group setting. Nancy is a grief facilitator, and in our subsequent interviews, you'll find out exactly what the groups that she runs are all about. Thank you for joining us. And let's close with a prayer. May all those that you pray for who have died rest in peace, and through the holy mercy of God, achieve eternal life. Amen. God bless you, and let me hear from you, fatherlouiscurti@hotmail.com, and I'll put Nancy's email up. Is that all right? No? Okay. We're not going to put Nancy's email up, so you want to contact me, my email is there. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. Have a great day.